Without further ado, once again, for the first talk, I'd like to welcome Mr. Carlos Vogeler, Executive Director of the UNWTO. As a reminder, he is the current Executive Director for Member Relations at the World Tourism Organization. On a more personal note, which I learned last night, Mr. Vogeler was born in Venezuela, of Spanish mother and Venezuelan German father. Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Welcome, Mr. Vogeler.
I'll be sitting over here. So thank you. Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Guy Crawford, former Chief Executive Officer of the Jumeirah Group. They did present him yesterday, but again, on a more private note, I know Guy for some time. I used to play with his children in the hotel he was managing. So I realized what an excellent job he had, and that is why I chose the career in hospitality.
Good man.
Yeah. He had an incredible apartment in a hotel, and I said, I want that. Yeah? So thank you for being here. I'd like to introduce José Ángel Preciados Fernández. He was with us again yesterday, General Director of Il Unión Hoteles in Spain. I will go through his career in a moment, but Director of Il Unión Hoteles. Il Unión Hotel is the only hotel chain in the world certified in universal accessibility and the hotel chain leader in labor inclusion of people with disabilities. And we'll learn a bit more about that in the presentation. Thank you. And searching online with some big data, I found Ted Sullivan. He was with us yesterday, Vice President Global Analytics of Adara. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you.
Can I ask you to sit over there? 'Cause I need to
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Excuse me. Try.
And I'll explain a bit more about you as well in the talks. So here we go. Another round of applause for our guests. Okay, I just, the idea today really was to have, or let's say the beauty of the presentation today was to have an open discussion to hear about future leaders, future current leaders. I'm used to talking to our students, that's why I said that, sorry. And so I have a few general questions to ask, but before I do so, I think, Guy, you had a presentation that you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, just a couple of slides. Do you have
Yes.
the clicker, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry. You go, Guy.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'm a very visual person, so I find it quite difficult to try and come up with a couple of ideas unless I've actually got something in front of me that I'm looking at. So the most important part of this slide is the name of my vineyard, which is at the bottom, called Domaine de la Sanche, okay? But a couple of thoughts that I thought, and I was asked just to keep it very quick, as some thoughts for future leaders. And the first thing I thought was to say to you, if you can pick the right partner. This is an incredible industry, but it's hard. And it's a hard industry to work in. And if you're lucky enough to find the right partner, then, I would really have a real go at it. This is a photograph of me explaining to my wife how much money we're going to make selling wine, okay? Okay, which I think is very close to reality as well, but never mind. Another idea I thought just over the course of my career that I thought was interesting was a thing called Gemba Day, where for the last years of my professional life, I was the chief executive of quite big companies. In the UK, I looked after 116 hotels, and it was part of the Forte Group, at the time the largest hotel group in the world. And we used to close the head office for 2 days once a year. And every person in the head office had to go out and work in a hotel. And it really, I promise you, if you do that, no matter what business you're in, and you go and do that, you will learn something. And I thought I'd give you two examples. One was in Lake Windermere, and I went up to work as a breakfast waiter, serving breakfast to the guests. And I was working with this charming lady who I think would have been in her 60s, was helping me understand how we served breakfast. And she said to me, this stupid man from head office had said to us that we've got to use these point-of-sale machines in the restaurant to actually get the customer's orders, to make it faster. And now when I take an order for 6 people, I never used to be able to say, who's ordered omelette, who's ordered steak, who's ordered X. Because when I did it with paper, I used to write down man, blue tie, and then I worked my way around from there as to what everybody's orders were. So I never had to go back. Now this stupid man from head office, which was me, has made us get rid of that. And so then I was able to go back to the technical people and say, give me a tweak inside this that allows me to do it electronically as well. So I thought that was just one good idea, and I've got hundreds of them. The second one was, when I was working out in Dubai, we had Gemba Day, so we closed the head office. Gerald, who was the chairman, went to wash the plates in Burj Al Arab. Good for Gerald. I went to work as a beach boy. And I don't know if any of you have been down in Dubai, and if you've walked along a beach, but if you're walking along a beach in 35 degrees to take an order from a customer that's trying to have a glass of water, and you're not allowed a glass of water because you're working, it's hot. So I did this for a day, and I promise you I've never done anything harder in my life. There, I went down afterwards and ordered point-of-sale terminals for the colleagues that were working down on the beaches so they could place their order from the beach to the bar. And then you didn't need to walk backwards and forwards all the time. You could place a couple of orders and then walk back. And that sort of was something that I thought was worthwhile. Close your head office, go away from what you do regularly, future leaders, and actually go, I would suggest that if you're a senior manager, go as low as you possibly can do. And low doesn't mean in a derogatory way. Just go through your hierarchy and down. But wherever you are, go 2 or 3 positions, and don't go and do the job you want to do. Don't go and drive buggies, because that's kind of easy and a bit of fun. I worked for a gentleman called Charles Allen, who I used to run the Tesco Group, Granada Television, and we were part of his division. And we used to go, if we were looking for capital investment, and the head of finance for, at that time it was Granada, I would maybe be following the person doing a television series of Heartbeat, asking for investment in our hotels. He would not allow you to make a presentation unless you had really understood what you were doing. And if you really understood what you were doing, he would say you must be able to put it on one piece of paper. If you can't put it down on one piece of paper and explain what you're trying to do, you haven't totally grasped what your idea is. And as somebody who's sat in front of presentations of 42 pages, and I've fallen asleep before the end of the presentation, the value of having somebody present to you, as they will in your future career, of knowing precisely what they want, I think is incredibly important. My final one to everybody, which I really wanted to make, is in your career, be honest. Honest in every sense of the word. Honest yourself, honest to the people you work with. You will meet in your career lots of people, of governments, of just all walks of life who are dishonest. You work in an industry that interacts with lots of people. There is no gray area in honesty. You're honest or you're not honest. So my view my thought, and I really wanted to emphasize that, you're a young person. You're going to be tempted. If you're not tempted, you're in the wrong industry, okay? You will be tempted. Please be honest, be ethical, gender, sex, religion, whatever, be honest. And I'm sorry I was the only one that wanted, but visually I got to put those things, okay? So that's me. Thank you very much, God. Thank you.
Mr. Vogler, I'll come to you with the first question, and hopefully I can also give the same question to all of you. I would like to ask you about your passion or vocation, or how you ended up in the tourism industry?
Well, I guess that like many of us, things happen by a number of circumstances that you're not necessarily looking for, but just come up. In my case, I was fortunate enough to have my mother deciding that we had to go to Canada for my education. And I learned a different way of approaching education and work in North America compared to what we had at that time in Spain. Students in those times in Spain spent long summer holidays doing absolutely nothing. And I discovered that in North America they had a different approach. Students were doing a number of different things. And those number of different things could be from being a packing boy in the supermarket, delivering newspapers, I mean, any type of job. But when we finished our term, everybody was sharing, what are we going to do this summer in terms of work? Nobody was thinking about, where are we going on holidays? Everybody was thinking, what type of work am I going to do? I was fortunate enough to be offered a job at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in their signature restaurant, which was called Le Café de Paris. And it was one of the most renowned restaurants in Montreal, as a busboy. I think everybody knows what a busboy does, which is basically assist the waiter. This was a very sophisticated restaurant, so we had the maître d'hôtel, who was the big boss in the restaurant, and we had the captains, then we had the sommelier, then we had the waiters, and then we had the busboys. And we busboys, the only thing we did is bring dishes up and down and do whatever the waiter was telling us to do. But I did that 3 consecutive years, 3 consecutive summers, and I really enjoyed it. And you know, my best reward was when the waiter, who was your first boss, was telling you, you know what, Carlos, this time you can try to do the crêpe Suzette flambé in front of the guests. I said, my goodness, am I going to be able to do that and get all the fire going up? That was my great achievement. That day, I went back to my home being really proud of it and saying, my goodness, what have I done? So I think that was done by accident, and then it follows up, and I don't want to bore you with stories, because then when I came back to Spain, after 3 years in Canada, I realized that I had to continue my studies, of course, but at the same time, I had to continue my work. So I started to work as a tour guide. And that gave me an opportunity, because obviously I had learned foreign languages, which at that time in Spain, you know, you didn't have so many people that could speak English and French. And I had the opportunity of touring the whole of Europe in my summer vacation again. And that gave me a tremendous experience. So I think that I was blessed with those 2 opportunities, and that is what brought me into the travel and tourism business.
Thank you very much for that. Our students must be proud because they can make crêpe Suzette already, I think, right? José Ángel, from your side, I know you have a lot of experience in hotels. Perdón, tiene mucha experiencia en hoteles. ¿Qué es lo que le ha traído al mundo del turismo y cómo ha llegado a ello?
Bueno, si tuviera que decir algo que quedase bien un poco en un foro, ¿no? Pues podríamos decir, se podía contar muchas cosas, ¿no? Yo la verdad que he llegado por casualidad. Yo llegué hace 30 y tantos años por una casualidad de una frustración personal de hacer unos estudios vinculados a una empresa familiar que realmente me generaba muchísima frustración porque no era algo que me apasionaba, y llegué al turismo por llegar a un sector que realmente, y no lo he dicho nunca esto, me recomendaron porque tenía muchísima facilidad de acceso al mercado laboral y porque había muchas chicas con las cuales poder establecer relaciones. Eso era la realidad. Entonces me dije, de pasar de económicas o empresariales a algo divertido, pues realmente no se cumplió ninguna de las dos. Porque la segunda, por supuesto, Y la primera porque no era tan fácil acceder y no era tan simple llegar a tener un proyecto de verdad como el que luego afortunadamente he podido tener. Yo llegué por otra casualidad el primer hotel de la compañía NH Hoteles en España, de la mano de Antonio Catalán, con lo cual imagínate la fortuna que pudo ser para mí llegar en Pamplona, una capital de provincia, en el primer hotel del fundador de la compañía, y a raíz de ahí hice mi carrera durante 18 años hasta llegar a la dirección de operaciones de todo el grupo. Y luego tuve la casualidad de que apareció un proyecto que yo creo que es el proyecto más importante que puedo tener, que jamás hubiera podido imaginar tener entre manos, que es estar en un proyecto único en el mundo, con una organización única en el mundo, en un grupo de empresas único en el mundo, que es Ilunion Hoteles, dentro de la ONCE y su fundación, y todo lo que supone el desarrollar un proyecto de conciencia social, de desarrollo personal, de gratificación, de compromiso con tu entorno, y no solamente la gente, sino también el entorno en el que tú te mueves, con esfuerzo, con sobreesfuerzo, trabajando con gente enorme, muy grande, muy competitiva, pero que tiene muchas dificultades y que todos los días demuestra que realmente son auténticos héroes desde que se levantan hasta que se acuestan, y todo a través de muchísimo esfuerzo, que es lo que hace que pues, todos los días nos levantemos a las 5 de la mañana y acabemos cuando tengamos que acabar, para intentar estar a la altura de gente enormemente impresionante, ¿no? Como la que forma parte de nuestro grupo.
Muchas gracias, José Ángel. Hablaremos en un momento sobre Ilunion y para entender un poco más también todo lo que hacéis. I'll move on to you, Ted. You've had about 20 years experience in tourism and now working with data. Can you tell us what brought you to tourism or how you started?
Yeah, this probably won't surprise any of you, but it's kind of a weird story of how I got into tourism. I graduated from college, and my dad was an attorney, and I was always just going to be an attorney. And I was getting ready to go to law school, and I realized that my dad was miserable, all his friends that were attorneys were miserable, and all the other attorneys I knew were miserable. I don't want to do this. This is not my personality. So I packed up all my stuff, and I moved to an island off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina for 4 years, and I bartended and surfed, and I worked in hotels, and I just did that. And I saved up quite a bit of money bartending, and I was like, all right, I got all this money. Maybe I should do something with my life. I'm just living at the beach every day. And I went back, and over Thanksgiving, I met my friend from high school, and he said, hey, do you want to buy this call center with me? I'm like, what's a call center? I don't know what a call center is. He goes, well, my uncle's selling it, and I want to buy it. You want to buy it? And it's basically people just answering phone calls, and he had 40 employees. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do something. I'm going to take a risk, and I bought this call center. And I started realizing when we were selling, we could sell and answer tourism phone calls. So if you called Colorado or Missouri or any of that, you could answer and say, hi, thanks for calling Colorado. And we would send them a travel guide. And that's how I started getting into tourism and data. And he's like, hey, you're a bartender. This works great. And over 10 years, we grew to 1,150 employees. We answered phone calls for 75 destinations around the world. And I loved the tourism aspect of taking phone calls and sending the data and tracking campaigns. And never had a resume. That's how I got involved in the tourism industry and my love for data and for tourism. Wow. Yeah, that's it. And then I'll tell you a story later of how I got out of the call center into an agency and then into data. Because it's all kind of weird, you know, but I love it.
Great. We'll absolutely get into that. Yeah.
Pardon? Yeah.
We'll get into how you got out. Yeah. Does the call center still exist?
It does.
Okay.
There are now 3,000 employees, and they're doing it, but no tourism phone calls anymore.
Okay.
That's why I got out of it. So there's answering phone calls for like food stamps and for catalogs. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll move on to you, Guy. What brought you to hospitality?
I think I've been extremely lucky in my life. I've never wanted to do anything else. I've no idea why. My parents and my grandparents had their own small hotels in the north of Scotland, and I left school and started working in hotels. And I'm extremely fortunate in my life that I think 99.9% of every day I wanted to go to work. And I don't know why. I mean, I wish I knew. I tried to tell my children why, and that they don't understand me either, okay? I loved this industry. I'd loved every day, even the bits that were hard when, you've been under departure by 800 rooms and there's a plane load of people at the airport on their way to your hotel and you don't have rooms for them. I used to find that quite challenging sometimes, but no, it's a fun industry and just something I've always wanted to do.
It's in your DNA, you say, right?
It's in my DNA, I think, yeah.
Thank you, Guy. I'll move on to another general question for each of you, and I'll start with you, Mr. Vogler. Was there a tipping point in your career? And if you can tell us a bit about that.
Well, when one is becoming old, I think there are quite a few, and it's difficult to choose amongst the different ones. But perhaps I could recall a situation which was quite special. I started my more sort of formal career in one of the largest, and I would say probably more renowned tour operators in Spain at that time. I'm talking about the 80s, which was Pullman Tour. And I had a great boss who believed in me. And he's actually the one, when I was actually a tour leader, a tour guide, he said, well, I want to offer you a job as planning and contracts director. I want you to go and contract the hotels. And that was obviously a very interesting experience. I built in my experience through that. But I progressed in my career to the extent that he wanted me to be his successor. So he was retiring, he presented to the board of directors his proposal of making me managing director of the group, which I was happy to, because it was a very, very interesting offer. But then in the meantime, I had a headhunter that came to me and said, look, we want to talk to you. I said, I'm not interested. Yeah, but we want to talk to you. I said, no, I have a very good job, so why do you want to talk to me? I mean, no, but we have this very interesting American multinational company and so forth that we would like to discuss. I said, well, okay, I have nothing to lose, but I don't want you to waste your time, because I have a very good job, and I've been offered an even better job, and I'm very happy in what I'm doing. I said, well, if we believe you're the right person, we'll give you enough reasons to change your mind. So I was very intrigued by that. So I went through the process. And long story short, I changed my mind. And I went to that company. That company happened to be owned by a lady that was an amazing story. And let me take a couple of minutes to share it with you. The company name is RCI, Resort Condominiums International. They are the largest exchange company in the timeshare world. And that company had been established by her and her husband back in, I think it was back in 1975, 76. A very successful company. They employed like 5,000 people around the world, opened offices, very sophisticated technology at that time. But that success was somehow interrupted by a divorce. They divorced, and the husband decided to fire her. And she, actually what she did is go to a court and say, okay, I'm ready to buy the company back from my husband. So the judge said, how much to the husband? How much do you value the company? And he said, well, I think the company is valued $30 million. Then she said, okay, I'll put $70 million on the table, and the company would be mine. Well, the husband was very happy, obviously. If he valued 30,000, he was going to get 70 million, I'm sorry. He was very happy. Again, long story short. 7 years after that, she sold the company for $875 million. So that gives you an idea of what type of lady we're talking about. But the end of the story is, what did she do with that money? She created something which, her name, by the way, is Crystal DeHaan, and you can Google her. She created a charity group called Crystal House to help children around the world in poor countries, not to give them only an education, to give them a career, to give them values. And she has been working on that since then. When she sold the company, then, years after that, to an American multinational company quoted in the New York Stock Exchange, she gave a check to each and every one of the 5,000 employees of the company, thanking them for their help and support. And to me, that was a unique case. Few years after, that company that bought with a totally different culture decided to centralize call centers. And I was in charge of 6 offices in Europe, in France, in Portugal, in Spain, in the Benelux. We had to fire about 300 people. And what we did when we fired 300 people is give them not only the highest pay possible, remuneration possible, indemnity possible, but also give them an outplacement plan to the extent that somehow people that were losing their jobs threw a party to celebrate because they understood that technology was coming, that there was a new approach, that we had to look for efficiencies, and this call center centralization was happening. To me, those are things which mark, because that has to do a lot with what Guy was saying about honesty, about principles, about values. There are many people that think that anything is allowed in business as long as you're profitable and as long as you make money for your shareholders. And that is a fine principle, but making money for your shareholders has to come along with ethics and values, and mainly thinking in the long term. And we understood that that was the way, and fortunately, the shareholders understood that the way of running things was to be reputable in the long term. And for that, you might have to lose in the short term in order to gain in the long term.
Thank you very much for that. I'll move on to José Ángel to ask him a similar question, which was, excuse me, if there was a tipping point in your career, as I mentioned earlier, what brought you to?
Yo he tenido 2 momentos claves en mi vida laboral, que llevo 30 y tantos, 33, 34 años desde que empecé, como os dije antes, en NH, que fueron claves para mi desarrollo personal y profesional. El primero fue, que no lo cuento nunca tampoco, lo voy a contar aquí. Dentro de mi trayectoria profesional hablo siempre de 2 grandes grupos, grandes experiencias, NH Hoteles y Ilunio, el grupo Ilunio, ¿no? Hay un momento en mi vida en el cual yo salgo de NH Hoteles y me encuentro a merced del mercado. Y hay un momento que yo me voy a ir con una compañía internacional con la cual yo encajaba muy bien y había mucho feeling. Y además me gustaba del proyecto, sobre todo internacional, que es de lo que yo más carezco, que no he tenido ninguna posibilidad de irme fuera porque siempre me he quedado en el ámbito nacional. Y mi gran frustración, por eso nunca lo nombro, es que me fui por dinero, por un proyecto en el cual el dinero mandaba sobre el resto. Es un proyecto que fue abrir el hotel más grande de Europa, el hotel más grande de Europa. Y evidentemente era un desafío, después de estar llevando 100 hoteles, era un desafío volver a tierra, volver otra vez a empezar, pero haciendo teniendo una experiencia muy especial desde la base otra vez, desde la base, pero en un hotel de una envergadura brutal, tremenda. Y ahí fue cuando me di cuenta de que realmente, y esto lo digo a los chavales que estáis aquí, a los estudiantes, que me di cuenta de que el dinero no iba a ser lo que marcara mi desarrollo personal y profesional. Porque efectivamente cobraba 4, 5 veces más de lo que cobraba después de 18 años de director de operaciones en NH, pero realmente estaba al servicio del patrón. Entonces, que esto es muy habitual, también es muy habitual, no en grandes corporaciones ni grandes empresas, pero es verdad que en el modelo, depende de qué modelos turísticos, es muy habitual estar a merced de los deseos o de los caprichos de alguien que realmente te está contratando y te está contratando por lo que fuera, por tu experiencia, por tu carrera, por lo que fuera, para un cometido que es muy personal, que es el suyo. Y ahí me di cuenta que no iba a ser el destino que me llevara a mí a través de una ambición puramente económica. Con lo cual, eso lo aprendí y eso yo creo que todo el mundo lo tiene que tener muy presente porque es uno de los grandes errores que muchas veces cometen los ejecutivos y los directivos cuando se implican con compañías. que duran lo que duran porque están constantemente a merced de las condiciones del mercado. La segunda, para mí, importante, muy importante, más importante todavía, es aterrizar en una compañía muy pequeña, sin tener demasiado claro dónde ibas, sin tener demasiado claro qué querían hacer con el accionista con ella, y encontrar a lo largo del tiempo, de los 14 años que yo llevo en Ilunion, hoteles que antes era Confortel, tener un clip que siempre hay, a lo largo de tu vida siempre hay diferentes clips que te hacen pensar que algo o vas a cambiar o tienes que cambiar o te hace cambiar, ¿no? En donde yo incluso era muy reticente a entender cómo personas con las dificultades que tienen podían hacer algo que nadie, ni yo incluso, podía creer que podían hacerlo. Entonces, después de esta crisis tan brutal, en la cual nosotros estuvimos a punto de desaparecer, y gracias al accionista que aguantó a la compañía, porque lógicamente el compromiso que tienen socialmente con las personas con discapacidad hacía que podían perder también esa posibilidad laboral estas personas. Al salir de la crisis, nosotros, y yo el primero, me di cuenta de que nosotros no podíamos seguir con el mismo rumbo que seguían los demás. Nosotros no podíamos hacer lo mismo que hicimos antes y que nos llevó a donde nos llevó, porque realmente no íbamos a ser una compañía de primer nivel en cuanto a envergadura, no íbamos a ser una compañía reconocida por sus atributos físicos y estéticos, no íbamos a ser una compañía que iba a ser reconocida por su marca internacional, por su dimensión, por su volumen de facturación, por su número de unidades. Eso es algo que nosotros no íbamos a llegar nunca y era absurdo pelear por eso. Con lo cual nunca estaremos en la primera liga de la dimensión, sobre todo de los atributos por los cuales se reconoce muchas veces al sector, ¿no? ¿Cuántos hoteles tienes? ¿Cuánto facturas? ¿Cuántas unidades tienes? ¿Y dónde estás, ¿no? ¿Y cuál es el hotel que vas a abrir mañana en cualquier país de Oriente, ¿no? Nos dimos cuenta de que nuestro camino no era eso y nos dimos cuenta que había llegado, que es lo más importante, un concepto único al cual había llegado su momento, que era la sostenibilidad. Pero la sostenibilidad no desde el punto de vista medioambiental, que muchas veces esto se manipula y hay muy poca gente que lo haga de verdad bien. Aquí tenemos Pepe, que es el responsable de Fuerte Hoteles, es un ejemplo que yo creo que lo tenéis que invitar a que cuente la experiencia realmente en materia de sostenibilidad medioambiental. Pero hay mucha gente que lo utiliza desde el punto de vista del marketing y del ajuste de costes, que lo hemos hecho todos, le ponemos una página web en verde y queda bonito, ¿no? Apagamos las luces, decimos a la gente que no se duche, que no deje las toallas y lógicamente esto va a la cuenta de explotación. Pero realmente dijimos, tenemos que ir por aquí, profundizar mucho más, por eso tenemos los hoteles, somos la única compañía que tiene todos los hoteles certificados con la Q de sostenibilidad y nos fuimos a profundizar y avanzar lo más rápidamente posible en la sostenibilidad social. ¿Qué hemos conseguido? Pues que realmente en estos 2 o 3 años post-crisis, que es verdad que a nosotros nos ha dado una oportunidad, pues nos hemos convertido en una compañía única en el mundo, que somos la única que tiene el 40% de personas con discapacidad. Hoy el día 1 de noviembre, tiene 9 hoteles, centros especiales de empleo, es decir, son 9 hoteles que tienen más del 75% de personas con discapacidad trabajando, compitiendo con las grandes marcas nacionales, las internacionales, con los grandes profesionales, directores, compitiendo en la misma liga, pero con gente diferente, con gente muy diferente, con gente mucho más competitiva que seguramente, incluso los que salís de aquí, vais a tener que pelear con gente que todas las mañanas sabe lo que es la dureza de enfrentarse a coger un autobús o de enfrentarse a tener una herramienta tecnológica que le permita hacer un check-in más rápido que otro, porque tiene una dificultad visual, o que le dificulta el poder acceder a un puesto laboral que nadie le da en el sector, que nosotros recogemos del sector como desechos, porque los sacan del sector y los tenemos que recoger nosotros y darles una oportunidad. Con lo cual, tener un concepto de valor tan brutal como un grupo de gente que ha encontrado un sentido a su vida dentro de una organización es una oportunidad que te hace tener un proyecto en tus manos que muy gratificante, ¿no? Y que todos los días cuando llegas a trabajar te encuentras que, evidentemente, no te puedes quejar nunca, no te puedes quejar si te duele algo, una muela, no te puedes quejar si te duele el estómago, si has comido bien o has dormido mal, porque todos los días te dicen quieto. Y cuando sales dices, yo creo que he hecho algo que ha merecido la pena hoy.
Muchas gracias por Muchas gracias por traer el tema. Es verdad que nosotros también aquí en Le Roche son unos valores que transmitimos a los alumnos. Efectivamente, Ilunión y Fuerte son ejemplos que utilizamos aquí a diario sobre lo que están haciendo y espero poder profundizar un poco más tarde en la conversación con algunas preguntas relacionadas con el tema. I'll move on to you, Ted. Obviously, the tipping point in your career was buying that call center, right?
One of them.
One of them. Okay, so would you like to share another? And I have another question for you. Is there somebody that you looked up to, or do you have a mentor in your life?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so here's my tipping point. Call center's doing great. We're answering tourism phone calls, all of that. But then tourism phone calls started going down because the internet, right? So people weren't calling anymore. So we had this infrastructure of people answering phone calls, and I started selling to Health and Human Services and Medicare and Medicaid, and the call center started answering questions like that. We were doing better than ever, but we were no longer involved in tourism. And I'm going around opening up call centers, doing ribbon cuttings, like, yay, a new call center in this town. And I'm walking around, I'm just not happy, and I realize I just turned into my dad. I am now miserable. I mean, I don't like what I'm doing. And some of my clients were in the advertising, and I said, you know what? I realize that I am most happy when I work in travel and tourism. I enjoy the product. I enjoy the people. At my wedding, half the people were my clients in travel and tourism that I work with. They become your family. And I realized that it kind of wasn't about the money. It wasn't about that. I want to get back to travel and tourism. So I went and met with my mentor, who was my buddy, who talked a bartender into buying a call center. And we sat down and had a beer, and as soon as I sat down, he said, "You're out, aren't you?" I said, "I'm out. I'm out. I'm going to join an advertising agency that specializes in travel and tourism because I love it. It's in my blood." And he said, "Do it." You know, and unless you propose a solution, you're just complaining. So I proposed a solution to myself, and I stayed in travel and tourism, and I worked in an advertising agency that specialized in destination marketing, and that's what I did.
And is there somebody that impacted you, a mentor or a particular person, or
Yeah.
what inspires you?
I found, the U.S. Travel and Tourism Association. Roger Dow is the president and CEO, and the past 10 years, he's kind of taken me under his wing, and he does a really good job of just seeing who out there loves tourism, is passionate about it, and that can actually help the industry and be an advocate for the industry. And seeing how he has weathered the storm after 9/11, after various, attacks in the United States, after the Trump travel ban, all of that, he was very cool, said, we're going to get through it, always led the industry, always found a good way, and gathered the troops, and I just admired the way he did that. And I respect that, and I think other destinations around the world have learned a lot since that too, and we're weathering the storm of whenever something happens to our wonderful industry. And so he's my guy.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Ted. Guy, I'll ask you, is there someone that had a tremendous impact on you in your career?
Yes, but I've got to talk about tipping point because I've worked myself there, and also I've got such admiration for what Josie has done. I think that's to be applauded. That's great work. Tipping point for me was I was 27, one of the youngest general managers working in a four-star hotel in London. But the next position I wanted, the guy I think was 48. Mm-hmm. So, that was the next youngest general manager in the group. So I applied to Trust House 40 International for a job, and they said to me, would you go to Guyana? And I said, yes. And they said to me, well, this is what your salary is. And I said, yes. I signed it, and then I went home, and I got a map to look where Guyana was, because I didn't even know where Guyana was. So that was sort of a major start in my life to go from the security of Europe in the late 70s to South America in the late 70s. I mean, we were sort of talking about invading Venezuela most weeks, okay, and in British Guyana, I don't know what we would have invaded with. And then, so that was my main sort of tipping point, which I thought was quite interesting. And the second tipping point was when the first financial crisis happened in the year 2000. I was looking after, at that point in time, 117 hotels in the UK, and we had to make about 400 people redundant. And I was told, right, HR will do all of that, guy, you just need to announce it. But I said, I can't do that to people. You know, some of these people are in their late 50s, they're in their early 60s. I'm going to destroy them. So I said I would do it myself to anybody that was over 20 years service. So I went out into the businesses, and because you have to make money, otherwise you didn't survive. But I wasn't going to allow somebody else to do that for me, because it's hard to do that to people, to stand in front of people or to sit down. When I'd done that, I said I would never do it again, because it's heart-wrenching. You know, you are hurting people. So that's when I decided to go resign from that company. Money not important, and it was the stock exchange announcement, and I was asked to go to my next person, who I think was a real person that I admire, which was Sheikh Mohammed out in Dubai. And he was the first boss that we ever had who never spoke to me about money. Money's important, huh? But Sheikh Mohammed would go into one of our hotels that we were managing for him, and he would say, Guy, do not allow the general manager to come with me. And he would walk around the beaches and around the hotel talking to guests. And he would ask them how the holiday was. And he would say, I'm Mohammed. And if they hadn't seen him driving up with car plate number 1, they wouldn't have known he was one of the richest men in the world and one of the most influential. And the admiration I had for somebody who had a vision, who took a whole country with him, and that was driving that with a force of personality, it's extraordinary and a great, great privilege. You know, now Dubai is huge, but when we were first doing it, you know, we were one of the first hotels to be doing that down there. So a good man his country deserves success as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guy. We'll get into another question related as well. I'll come back to you, Mr. Vogler, and this is more specific to you. The question I wanted to ask you is, it's maybe a difficult one, but what are the most important decisions you make as a leader of the UNWTO?
Well, you know, I think it's a blessing to work for an organization like UNWTO, or I would say any UN or any international organization, or even any NGO, particularly for those of us that have been involved in the business sector all our lives. So we move to a completely different dimension on the things that we need to do, on the decisions that we need to take, because they are not related to money at all. They're not related to profits. They're not related to sales. They're not related to stock price. They are related to analyzing things and see how we can help our member states, mainly our affiliate members, our community, to do better. But do better also with the objective of improving people's lives. So that's why I think it is a blessing to, and this is why I personally took the decision at a given time in my career to go from the business sector, where you're involved with all that, to a completely different way of doing things. Of course, there are some difficult situations that you have to face, particularly when you have geopolitical instability in certain countries that struggle to overcome political coups, struggle to overcome economic crisis, and you see the people responsible for tourism within that particular country seeking for your help and see how they can make their case accepted by the rest of the cabinet, by the rest of the society. I think one of the most difficult times that we had to face is when we saw certain countries with a business mentality in their politics, and I would not like to mention any for diplomatic reasons, but it would be easy to deduct many of developed countries that didn't see the value of being members of an organization, that in their view, they were looking at the return on investment. When a government starts looking at their involvement in international organizations with that perspective, obviously the equation doesn't work. If you say, I'm putting this amount of money in this organization, what am I getting in return? It doesn't work. Mainly if you are a government that has a business-oriented mentality. And unfortunately, we had to face situations like that with a number of governments that were demanding that type of return. And we had to say, look, you have an obligation with the world as a developed country. Your obligation and your responsibility is to support the developing world. And tourism is a magnificent instrument for development. And you have to think not on what you can get, but on what you can give. And those were the most difficult times that we had to face. We are still facing when we saw certain developed countries deciding to leave the organization because their governments, and not necessarily the tourism departments, but the rest of departments within the governments didn't understand how important it is to play the role of a technical assistant provider, a donor to the international community in order to improve people's lives in the developing world. And it's very sad to see that some governments of developed countries, unfortunately, didn't have that vision.
It actually brings me to the next question I had, because we do mention to our students that hospitality obviously is an excellent tool to make this world a better place. And what you're mentioning of some people not getting on the bus in a way, is there any story? Obviously, Il Union is an example that there is hope that through hospitality we can make this world a better place. But is there any particular story that you'd like to share with us, especially with all the travels you've done and all the people you've met?
It's amazing. There are plenty of stories, personal stories of humble people that have found in tourism a way to make the life of their families better. And those stories can be found in a couple of books that we have published. Our Secretary General Taleb Rifai decided, out of a trip to Vietnam some years ago, when he was told a story by a person there that was rowing a boat in one of the lakes in Vietnam and just taking tourists from one side of the lake to another side of the lake. And he had the opportunity with an interpreter to communicate with this person. And this person told him the story and how that opportunity of rowing that boat for tourists had changed her life, had given her opportunities, offered her the opportunity of bringing her son and daughter to university and giving them a career. There is another beautiful story in the Peruvian Andes with a lady called Cristina Suaña, an indigenous person that started to build a very small hostel up in the Andes Mountains and started to have tourists as guests, and there's one after the other. So we decided to publish this book, which is not about projects, it's not about plans, it's not about countries, it's about people. And very humble people that have found in tourism a way of improving the lives of their family. So I would recommend to go to that, Tourism Stories is called, it's on our website, you can download it, and you can read one after the other. We have people from all over the world telling in first person that story of how tourism has changed our lives. And that is, when we see those things, we say, well, this is worthwhile, the work that we are doing.
And these stories can be found on your website?
Exactly.
Or, yes, on
yeah,
the
there is
UNWTO
the
website. Publication
is Tourism Stories, and now we have produced the second edition. And anytime that we go around the world and we find this story that we think that could help others understand how small little things in tourism, because at the end of the day, we know that tourism is made up of very micro and mini entrepreneurship. And it's amazing to see those little things that change people's lives.
Perfect. We'll make sure our students absolutely look into it as well. José Ángel, estamos obviamente hablando de cómo a través del turismo podemos hacer este mundo mejor, y creo que obviamente Il Unión es un ejemplo de ello, ¿no? Quería hablar un poco más sobre los valores que tenéis en la empresa, ¿Cómo lo transmitís a vuestros empleados? ¿Y qué impacto tiene en el resto de hoteles o en el resto de, o en la competición, ¿no? que hay?
Competencia.
La competencia, perdón.
Bueno, de entrada nosotros, la compañía sabe, todo el mundo que tiene que accede o que quiere acceder a convivir con nosotros, vivir con nosotros, tener la experiencia de trabajar con nosotros, sabe dónde viene. Entonces sabe que no viene una compañía común, una compañía normal, ¿no? Una compañía que esté identificada por unos atributos muy usuales, ¿no? Sino muy diferente. Con lo cual, el que quiere venir con nosotros sabe perfectamente, nos identifica muy bien y nos conoce muy bien. El que está con nosotros lo vive desde el primero de la mañana hasta que se va. Lo vive y lo participa, en algunos casos lo sufre también, porque es difícil, pero realmente, independientemente que hay un periodo de adaptación, un periodo de formación, evidentemente lo primero que se forma a alguien es en accesibilidad, ¿no? La primera persona que entra en un hotel, lo primero que se le da es atención a una persona con discapacidad, lo primero, no, es lo primero que se le pide. Porque lógicamente tiene que saber cómo atender a un viajero, venga con una dificultad o no. Y entre otras cosas, lo que tiene que tener también las herramientas necesarias para que eso pueda ser posible, ¿no? Porque él también es una persona que puede tener una discapacidad y también tiene que estar en el mercado laboral. Tiene que tener todas las ayudas posibles. Pero realmente tú respiras en un ambiente muy diferente, ¿no? Tú cuando entras en un hotel nuestro, inmediatamente identificas que algo pasa. Algo pasa porque ves que las cosas quizás no funcionan como tú te esperas, ¿no? Eso te lleva a más cosas, ¿no? A entender perfectamente cómo está la sociedad preparada para depende qué modelos y depende qué formatos de negocio o empresas o experiencias, pues la gente no está acostumbrada a ver, ¿no? Independientemente que en este país hay 4,5 millones de personas con discapacidad, sin contar los abuelos, los abueletes. Y en Europa hay 60 o 70, y en el mundo hay 600, 700. Esto si lo llevas al ámbito familiar, multiplicáis por 3, por 4, y en España hay más de 10 millones de personas que tocan directamente la discapacidad. Y hay otro millón y pico de personas en riesgo de exclusión social, maltratadas, prostitución, drogadicción, abuelos que están en una situación precaria. Bueno, ese mundo es el nuestro. Ese mundo es el que nosotros tocamos todos los días. Y ese mundo, cuando tú estás trabajando delante de un cliente que es un ejecutivo, un deportista, una modelo o una persona que viene con su familia, eso se palpa porque el hotel, cuando tú llegas a un hotel, lo primero que te dicen es bienvenido a un mundo diferente formado por personas extraordinarias. De momento tú ya estás viendo algo. Y tú cuando entras en el hotel ves que hay una persona que tiene una dificultad para algo. Otra cosa que te sonríe igual que otros. O que te atiende con el mismo idioma o con el idioma que tú necesitas, o que realmente tiene la misma preparación que cualquier otro, ¿no? Pero hay algo, hay un problema, es que el problema nuestro, el gran problema nuestro es comunicar esto, es comunicar y romper un poco los tabús, la falta de, muchas veces de información, algunos prejuicios que hay en el mundo. Yo los tuve también, yo no creía que podíamos llegar a lo que hemos conseguido. De intentar demostrar que las cosas son posibles haciéndolo de otra manera, con un esfuerzo tremendo, pero con una gratificación increíble.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Ted, we're actually talking about responsibility, and one of the points I did want to bring up, and especially to you, was a question regarding all these startups by young people, such as Uber or Airbnb, to name a few, where people are doing things, and I'm not sure if they're realizing that they're setting a trend, and if they realize they have a responsibility when they do these things.
So is your question whether or not they realize their responsibility on that at all? I think that the reality of realizing what you've created comes later. I mean, creating Uber, great idea. Creating Airbnb, fantastic idea that has actually changed our industry for the better. So do I think that they realize that they could have a negative positive? No. And I think that there will constantly be changes that way. I think there was a statistic that showed that Fortune 500 companies now, only like 20% of them are going to be around in 15 years from now or something like that. It's something like, because there's so many new startups and people are changing things and ideas are so much more frequent. but I think as an industry we should embrace them because I think the Airbnbs and the Ubers have improved our industry. I think people are enjoying travel more because they have more options than they've ever had in the past. I think we need to realign how Airbnb pays the destinations and stuff like that. They have to have some skin in the game, definitely. But I love the idea that I actually really am fond of millennials, and I'm very fond of the younger ones. I think that they are the ones changing the way we're doing things. I think they're changing the way our industry is going to be in the future, and I think they're going to get more and more people traveling out there in the future. Whether or not they understand their impact or not, probably not to start. I think it hits them a little bit later. But I think keep doing it, and I think as an industry we need to embrace it because our customers are embracing all these new things and trying new things. We need to realize that that's what our customers are going to be doing and just sort of figure it out and keep up with it if we can.
Do any of you want to comment or question?
Sorry. Go ahead.
I think some of those companies are changing the industry, but I also think, go back to my ethical thing, you know, if you're staying in an Airbnb hotel in Venice, and next door you've got a traditional hotel, the traditional hotel will be paying all its local taxes, all its different things into society and into that city. Airbnb have to take a moral responsibility, if not an ethical one, to pay theirs some skin in the game. They've got to abide by some of the rules, or governments and organizations have to get a lot more nimble about changing tax laws. So everybody says, right, I obey the law, you know, and what we do is legal. Yeah, but because it's legal doesn't make it ethically correct. So governments have to be fast, not of trying to discourage those companies, because I'm the same as Ted, you know. Keep them, they're great, they're changing the industry. But they've got to play by the rules. Skin in the game.
Agreed. We're trying that with Airbnb too. We tracked everything for Salt Lake City for the campaign. They did $5 million in campaign, and they showed 75% of people stayed in hotels. 25% stayed in Airbnb. And they went to Airbnb and said, hey, you're getting all this volume off our marketing campaign, but you're not paying us a dime. Airbnb was like, sorry, you know, we don't really have to. So we're trying to get that lined up and see that there's just a lot of stuff. But I think we will figure it out in a few years.
Mr. Rogler, you wanted to?
I think I totally agree with that. Basically, the key is to establish an even playing field. As long as we are able to do that, we need to welcome innovation, we need to welcome creativity, but we need to have an even playing field so that we compete with the right ethics and in the right way. And then whomever does better will get the business. But I would like also to give, if I think we're finishing right now.
Maybe even 1 minute for a question from anybody that would like to ask it. And
okay, then I would rather give that minute instead of saying what I was going to say.
Well, please do so. I mean, you left us intrigued.
I just wanted to remind us all, and particularly our students, that we have a brilliant future ahead of us. But we need to be able to enjoy every single moment of whatever we do. And I think we need to be humble enough to be ready to do whatever it takes. Sometimes, you know, we study in universities and we do higher studies, so we come out of there and we say, well, now I am a top person, so I'm not supposed to do this type of jobs which are not at my level. I think that's absolutely wrong. We need to be very humble, and we need not only to be ready to do that, but we need to enjoy doing that. And I think by that we're going to be much happier. I loved what we say, what somebody brought Confucius' phrase yesterday, find the right job, and then you will not have to work anymore in your life.
Thank you very much. Anybody would like to ask a question, particularly students or anybody that's willing to? Nobody? Maybe saving, oh, of course, Unji, thank you.
Well, since, although I'm an organizer, since nobody's asking question, I will take advantage. Some of you already said that you are lucky enough to have several opportunities in your life, and then there is some tipping points that you have to make a choice. Sometimes, as Carlos mentioned, that there are two great opportunity comes in front of you, and you have to make a choice. But sometimes you don't know whether I'm making a right choice or not. Is there any strategy? Because I think we are a lot of talents will encounter that kind of moment, that there are a lot of doors opened in front of them, but each door will lead to the different future. How do you make that judgment, and what strategy that you would have to make that decision?
If I may, I don't think there is strategy, Angie. I think there is intuition. But above all, and I think you mentioned it, don't think about the money when you need to take a decision. Think about what is going to make you happy. And probably then your intuition is going to be the right one. If you take a decision whenever you're confronted with a dilemma, should I go in this direction or in that other direction, and your only driver is money, you will never have enough, because you have that and then you want more and then more and more and more. Money is definitely not the driver. That I know. Which is the driver? Well, there are many other things that have to do with what makes you happy. What is really that click that when you go to work every morning, you're enthusiastic about it. And you're not saying, oh, I have to go to work. But you say, oh, today I'm going to do this. You need to find that click. That is what would make the right decision.
The best advice I ever got was exactly just that situation. I was in Ireland with my dad, and we were in this pub, and we were having a beer, and I said, well, do we want to just stay here and save money and stay at this Airbnb, just this B&B right across the street? Because the castle, this big castle, is like 300 euros a night. But this, and my dad's like, well, I don't, and we're arguing, and the barman just put 2 beers down. He said, gentlemen, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is the real fucking thing. And he goes, you can stay in a B&B any night you need to, but it's not every single day you get to stay in a castle. And we stayed in the castle. And I think that's just, think that all the time, students, everybody. This isn't a dress rehearsal. And if you want to do something to make you happy, take a little risk. And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake. That's fine. You can always do something else.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for, but I know everybody's going to be available during the coffee break and the lunch, so if you have any questions, I'm sure nobody of you would mind taking them on a more personal note. It was a real pleasure for me to be in this discussion with incredible people. I'm very humbled, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much.